If you're thinking about visiting Arches National Park, Utah, and are trying to research everything that you need to know before you go, then you're in the right place. In this episode, we're going to look at what not to do when you visit Arches National Park. Planning a trip to Arches National Park can be tricky. I always think it's helpful to know what mistakes that people commonly make so that you can avoid making the same mistakes. Hi, I'm James Ian, and I've written multiple guides and published several itineraries for Arches National Park. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you 7 helpful tips and tricks based around common mistakes that people make. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe right now. If you're watching or listening somewhere else, follow my podcast to get the episodes as they come out. And be sure to stay to the end. I'll be sharing my number 1 mistake that lots of people make. It's especially important if you're going to be visiting in the busy season. Let's take a look right now.
Welcome to National Parks Collecting with James Ian, the national park expert. He is here to help you have the best national parks trips ever. Get tips, discover hidden gems, and learn all you need to know. This is your path to collecting national parks experiences, memories, and maybe even a stamp or 2.
So what are the 7 biggest mistakes that I see people make when they plan their trip to Arches National Park? Remember to stay to the end for my number 1 tip to avoid the biggest mistake that people make. A mistake that's easy to make if you come from a different part of the country or another country altogether is to underestimate the weather. Arches National Park is in the desert, and weather conditions can be extreme, unpredictable, and quickly changing. The best time to hike Arches National Park is in the spring and the fall, but many people can only travel in the summer. If you're visiting in the summer, when average daytime temperatures are in the high 90s, temperatures can often exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Early mornings and late afternoons are the best time to be outside. So always be sun safe, always wear a hat, sunscreen, sunglasses. Always take more water with you than you think you'll need, plus, of course, some salty snacks. And be prepared for the weather to change suddenly. I've been there when it was really sunny, it was really nice, and then a sudden storm blew in with almost no warning. Suddenly there was lightning and it looked really kind of scary. And then half an hour later it was sunny again. Kind of crazy. But this is not uncommon. So be prepared for all kinds of weather, and don't make the mistake of underestimating the weather. Be prepared for fierce sun and sudden storms. Wear layers. What's a mistake that people often make when they're planning out their time in Arches National Park? A mistake that many people make in Arches that I see is only driving through the park and not hiking. Of course, this doesn't apply if you have limited mobility. If you have mobility difficulties and can't hike, you should absolutely still visit Arches National Park. There's a scenic drive. There are several viewpoints right next to a parking lot or a very short distance away. However, to see many of the most spectacular arches, you do need to hike. And it's a big mistake to limit yourself to just the viewpoints near the road if you're able to hike. Some of the hikes are easy, like the walk around Balanced Rock or the hike to North and South Windows, to Double Arch, Sand Dune Arch, Landscape Arch, and Skyline Arch. All of these are pretty easy and accessible for most people. Others are a moderate level of difficulty, including the most famous arch in the park, which is Delicate Arch, the one that appears on the Utah license plates, as well as Broken Arch, Tapestry Arch, and the hike down into Park Avenue. Still others, like the entire loop through Devil's Garden, which is my favorite hike by far in the park, and the guided hike through Fiery Furnace is also super fun, are more challenging, but totally worth the effort if you can. Fiery Furnace is like a maze-like section of the park where you actually need a special permit or to go on a guided ranger-led hike. I highly recommend taking the ranger-led hike if they're running when you're there. It involves really narrow crevices. You need to clamber up and scramble around, so you do need to have pretty good mobility for that hike. What's another mistake that people make when they plan a trip that includes Arches National Park? A common mistake people make when they're planning out their total trip itinerary is to breeze through the park in just one day or even less. Arches is one of the smaller national parks, and the first time I went, I thought I could see it all in a day, but I was wrong, and after one day, I was left wanting more. So don't make the same mistake as I did. Of course, if your time is limited and you only have one day available, then spending a day in Arches National Park is definitely better than not going at all. You'll be able to see many of the highlights in a day. However, if you have more time available and are trying to figure out how long to spend in Arches National Park, it's a mistake, I think, to allocate just one day. There is much more to see and do in Arches National Park than you may expect. The arches are truly amazing, and they're also incredibly varied. The park has several key sections, including Park Avenue, the Window section, Fiery Furnace, Devil's Garden, the Garden of Eden, and Delicate Arch. And I think you need 2.5 days to see them all at an enjoyable pace, particularly if you're hiking. Before we look at my other mistakes to avoid in Arches National Park, if you're watching this on my @National Parks Collecting YouTube channel and you haven't already, please like and subscribe below. It really does help. What's a mistake that people make when they're deciding where to stay in Arches National Park? A mistake that many people make, I think, is not camping in Arches National Park. Unlike most national parks, there aren't actually any lodges or inns or hotels in Arches National Park. In fact, there is only one place to stay inside the park itself, and that is the Devil's Garden Campground. Now, there are restrooms at Devil's Garden Campground. Each site has a fire ring and a picnic table, but the campground does not have showers or a store. So if you camp there, you do need to be self-sufficient. This obviously is not for everyone. But if you're able to camp and you like to camp, not trying at least to get a spot at Devil Gardens Campground is a mistake. Now, most people stay in nearby Moab, which is just 5 miles from the entrance to the national park and has a range of accommodation options. So yes, Moab is close to the park entrance. Yes, there are a range of accommodations in Moab. Yes, there are restaurants and bars in Moab. So it is super convenient. But there's nothing so great as staying deep inside the park, where there's no light pollution marring the night sky. You're surrounded by sandstone fins and desert scrub. It's a magical experience. Plus, it has the practical advantage of being at the far end of the road in the park, so you can get an early start to hike into Devil's Garden or to Delicate Arch without needing to get up quite so early to drive all the way from Moab, which is a 45-minute drive away. And you don't need timed entry reservations to get into the park for days that you have a reservation at the campground, so that can be another advantage. It can be difficult to get camping spaces, but it's worth a try at least. I love staying there. It's really great. We're over halfway through. Next up is mistake number 5. I'm going to confess this is a mistake that I made myself the first time I went to Arches, and I was kicking myself after. It's a bit of a strange choice for this list because it's not actually about the national park, but there are so many cool areas nearby, and it's a huge mistake to go all the way there and not visit Dead Horse Point State Park and Canyonlands National Park as well. Dead Horse Point State Park is only 40 minutes from Moab, about the same distance as Devil's Garden, actually. The focal point of the state park is the eponymous overlook, with a view over the Colorado River and the Canyonlands about 2,000 feet below. The view is stunning, and there are several easy trails in the state park to enjoy. A half a day is enough, but it's a real shame to go all the way to Arches National Park and miss out on this amazing state park. Canyonlands National Park is also a short drive from Moab, and although Arches gets all the attention, Canyonlands is a great national park that you should 100% go to when you're in the area. So far, we've looked at 5 mistakes that people often make in Arches National Park. We have 2 more left. Stay to the end to hear my number 1 mistake. But first up, a really common mistake that people make is not having a detailed and flexible plan. With Arches being so popular and with so many things to do, having a plan is essential. This is not a park that you can just drive to on a whim and expect to see all of the highlights easily. There is just one road through the park with the side road to Delicate Arch and the window section. The attractions are concentrated in several key areas along the road, And even with the timed entry system that's in place for much of the year, parking is still very limited and the popular places usually do fill up quickly. So although the park isn't that big, it is a big mistake to not have a planned itinerary. Of course, you also need to be flexible and be able to adjust your plans if things happen along the way. When planning your trip to Arches National Park, you need to coordinate entry times with drive times between the attractions. You need to know exactly how long each hike or viewpoint will optimally take, know which areas are most popular and when you need to get there to avoid having to wait for parking, and to coordinate those times throughout the day. All this can be intimidating or overwhelming. In fact, the number one thing that people ask me about is how to put everything together into an actual itinerary. They worry that they'll miss out on some of the arches. They worry that they'll be at a viewpoint or a hike when everyone else is there, and they either have to spend time waiting for a parking spot or compete with other people on the trails. Some of them are traveling with their whole family or a large group of friends and stressing about how to keep everybody happy. This is why I created super detailed itineraries for Arches National Park. And you can just click on the link in the notes below and it will take you to a page that explains more. There's a 1-day itinerary and a 2 to 3 day itinerary if you have more time. They provide an hour-by-hour breakdown, but also include all the information that you need to adjust them if necessary. There are options throughout the day for people who have different interests and different energy levels, so it's suitable for the whole group. So, for example, there might be an option for a long hike and exactly the same time, another option for the same part of the park that involves little or no hiking. They also include driving directions and maps, hiking trail descriptions and maps. There's tips, timings, warnings of things to watch out for or pay attention to, etc. Just click on the link in the show notes below and you can see broadly what's included in each day's itinerary. What's the worst mistake you can make? The worst mistake to make when planning a trip to Arches National Park in the busy season is not knowing about the timed entry system. Arches National Park is home to over 2,000 natural arches, sandstone fins, and balanced boulders. These make the park an extremely popular destination. There used to be crazy long lines from the entrance station all the way out onto the highway, and people would literally spend hours waiting to get inside the park. And then when they got in, they would spend even more time waiting for parking spots to open up at key areas in the park. It was a nightmare. So, to help control numbers in the park, the National Park Service has implemented a timed entry system that's in place for a lot of the year. So if you rock up to the park and expect to get in at any time you like, you may be making a huge mistake. You need reservations to enter Arches National Park for most of the time between April and October. This does vary a little each year, and you may not require reservations for the exact time you go, even if it falls within these months. So always check the National Park website for current information. But there is, in general, a timed entry system in place. You get your tickets on the recreation.gov website. Most of them are released 3 months in advance on the first of the month, and there may be some additional spaces that become available on the day before. If you do make this mistake and you don't get a timed entry permit for each day that you want to enter the park, or if you tried and weren't successful, there is another option. If you enter before or after the reservation period each day, so that means entering very early in the morning or much later in the afternoon, then you won't need a reservation and you can stay as long as you like. So as long as you're willing to get up very early and get into the park very early, there is a way around it. But if you want a little bit more of a comfort in when you're entering the park, get a timed entry permit, or at least check that it's required for when you're planning to be there. If you want help planning your trip, check the links in the description box below. There's a bunch of planning and booking resources there that you can use to plan and book your trip. And keep watching my videos to get even more help so that you can have the best national parks vacation ever. And if you want to get notified about the next episode, subscribe and click below.